The conference hall on Zenith Prime was the largest structure Kyle Morrison had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high above him that clouds formed near the top. 12 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed for their specific biology. Some breathed methane, others required intense heat, and a few existed partially in dimensions Kyle couldn't fully perceive. The technology that allowed them all to share this space was beyond anything Earth had developed. Kyle stood at the human podium, feeling very small and very alone. He wore his best diplomatic suit, dark blue with the Earth insignia on his chest. His hands rested on the smooth surface in front of him, keeping them from shaking. Behind him, 2 human aides sat quietly, but they couldn't help him now. This moment was his alone. The mediator, Delegate Zixala, moved to the center of the chamber. She was an insectoid being, nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and a crystalline exoskeleton that caught the light beautifully. Her voice came through the translation device in Kyle's ear as a pleasant, neutral tone. The Council recognizes the territorial dispute between the Vraxian Empire and the human species of Earth. War Primus Thelkar, you may present your claim. The Vraxian section erupted with movement. Thelkar rose to his full height, nearly 12 feet of armored muscle and savage grace. The Vraxians looked like someone had crossed a lizard with a tiger and then given it too many teeth. Their red eyes glowed with an inner fire, and their scales shifted colors based on their emotions. Right now, Thelkar's scales showed deep purple streaked with orange. Kyle's cultural briefing had told him this meant absolute certainty mixed with aggression. The system you humans call New Haven sits within ancient Vraxian territory, Thelkar said, his voice a deep rumble, even through translation. Your species arrived in our galaxy mere decades ago. You know nothing of our history, our claims, our rights. The Vraxian Empire claimed that system 3,000 years before your species even reached your own moon. Kyle wanted to interrupt, to point out that no Vraxian had set foot in that system for over a millennium, that it had been empty and unclaimed by any current galactic law. But protocol demanded he wait his turn. The human colony on the 4th planet is illegal, Thelkar continued. You have 30 standard days to remove all humans from the system. If you do not, the Vraxian 3rd Fleet will remove them for you. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The War Primus sat down, and several species in the chamber made gestures of approval. Kyle felt his stomach tighten. 30 days to evacuate 50,000 people, to abandon 5 years of work, to give up the most resource-rich system humanity had found. Ambassador Morrison, Zixala said gently, before you respond, the Council wishes to provide context. Perhaps you are not aware of how such disputes are typically resolved. Kyle nodded slowly. I would appreciate any guidance the Council can offer. What followed was 3 hours of testimony. Species after species came forward to describe their own experiences with territorial disputes. The pattern was always the same. The stronger species made a claim. The weaker species evaluated the military situation. The weaker species surrendered the territory. Everyone praised everyone else for their wisdom and civilization. Mutual prosperity followed. The Pelmara Union had given up 2 entire star systems to the Kreth Dominion. The Sorvex Collective had abandoned their oldest colony when the Vraxians demanded it. The Keltharian Republic had lost 3 systems in the past 50 years to various neighbors. Each time their ambassadors stood before the Council and spoke of how surrender had been the logical choice, the civilized choice, the choice that saved lives. You see, Ambassador Morrison, Zixala said as the testimonies concluded, war is a relic of primitive times. Species that reach the stars learn that some things are not worth fighting for. Territory can be replaced, resources can be found elsewhere, but lives, once lost, cannot be recovered. The Vraxians are offering you and your people a gift. They are giving you time to leave peacefully. Kyle looked around the chamber. Every species was watching him. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked impatient. A few looked curious, as if wondering what this young species would do. He thought about the messages he'd received from New Haven. Captain Lisa Grant had sent him a personal note from her ship in orbit around the colony. "We're not running, Kyle," she'd written. "Tell them we're not running." He thought about Admiral Casey Bryant back on Earth, probably watching this transmission right now. She'd told him before he left, "You know what to say if they push us. You know what humanity's answer has to be." He thought about his own daughter, who was 7 years old, and learning about the galaxy in school. What kind of galaxy did he want her to grow up in? One where humanity bowed whenever someone stronger made a demand? One where Earth abandoned its people because fighting back was considered uncivilized? Kyle took a deep breath and stood up straight. "Delegate Zixala, members of the Council, I have heard your wisdom and your experiences. I understand the path you've outlined for humanity. I understand that you believe surrender is the logical choice." He paused, making eye contact with Felkar across the chamber. "But humanity must respectfully decline. New Haven is our home. 50,000 humans live there. They have built lives, families, and a future. We will not abandon them. We will not surrender our colony because someone claims they owned it thousands of years ago. If the Vraxian Empire wants New Haven, they will have to take it by force." The silence that followed was absolute. Kyle could hear his own heartbeat. Somewhere in the chamber, a translator made a small clicking sound as it processed his words, as if unsure it had translated correctly. Zixala's crystalline body seemed to dim. "Ambassador Morrison, perhaps you do not understand. The Vraxian Third Fleet numbers over 200 warships. Earth has, according to our intelligence, fewer than 50 vessels capable of military action. This is not a battle you can win." "Maybe not," Kyle said quietly, "but it's a battle we will fight. Humanity learned a long time ago that some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. The safety of our people is another. We will not run." Felkar stood up again, his scales now burning bright orange. "Then you have chosen extinction, human. So be it." The War Primus turned and left the chamber, his delegation following. One by one, the other species began to murmur among themselves. Kyle heard phrases through his translator. Foolish, primitive, tragic. But he also heard something else, something quieter. From the Keltharian section, he heard, brave. Kyle gathered his materials and walked out of the chamber. His hands were steady now. He had delivered humanity's message. Whatever came next, at least they would face it standing up. The emergency session was called less than 6 hours after Kyle Morrison's declaration. He hadn't even made it back to his quarters on Zenith Prime before the summons arrived. This time the council chamber felt different. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by something that felt almost like panic. Delegate Zixala approached Kyle in the hallway before the session began. Her forearms moved in patterns that his cultural database said indicated deep concern. "Ambassador Morrison, please tell me your government will reconsider. I have spoken with the Vraxian delegation. They are genuinely confused by your response. They believe it must be a translation error, or a cultural misunderstanding." Kyle shook his head. "It's not a misunderstanding, Delegate. Those are our final words on the matter." "But why?" Zixala's voice carried actual emotion now, something Kyle hadn't heard before. "I have studied Earth's history. You are not a stupid species. You understand mathematics, probability, tactics. You must know you cannot win this fight." "Winning and fighting are not the same thing," Kyle said. "Sometimes you fight because it's the right thing to do, even if you know you might lose." Zixala was quiet for a moment. "We have a saying among my people. The tree that bends in the storm survives. The tree that stands rigid, breaks. Your species is choosing to be the rigid tree. We have a different saying, Kyle replied. Give me liberty or give me death. The session was chaos. 12 different species all tried to talk at once, their translators creating a cacophony of sound. The Pelmara ambassador, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Velthos, was practically begging Kyle to reconsider. The Sorvex representative, a collective intelligence housed in a tank of blue liquid, kept running probability calculations and displaying them on screens, showing that humanity had a 0.03% chance of victory. But it was the Keltharian ambassador who surprised Kyle the most. Ambassador Kren was a bird-like being with silver feathers and 3 eyes. She had been quiet during the previous session, but now she spoke directly to Kyle. Ambassador Morrison, I must ask you a question in private. May we speak outside this chamber? Kyle agreed, and they moved to a small conference room. Kren's feathers ruffled as she settled onto a perch designed for her species. What you said in the chamber, did you mean it? Truly? Every word, Kyle said. My people lost 3 star systems to aggressive neighbors, Kren said softly. Each time, the council advised us to surrender. Each time, we did. We told ourselves we were being civilized, being smart. But Ambassador Morrison, each time we surrendered, we lost a piece of ourselves. Our people began to believe we were weak, that we deserved to lose our worlds, that we had no right to defend what was ours. She looked at Kyle with all 3 eyes. If the Vraxians came for our homeworld tomorrow, I do not know if my people would have the courage to fight. We have forgotten how. You humans still remember. I envy you that. Back on Earth, Admiral Casey Bryant was not sleeping. She stood in the command center deep beneath the North American continent, watching tactical displays that showed the entire United Earth Defense Fleet. 47 ships. That was everything humanity had that could fight in space. 47 ships against over 200. Captain Lisa Grant's face appeared on the main screen. She was transmitting from the UEDS Defiant, currently in orbit around New Haven. Admiral, we've begun evacuation of non-essential personnel from the colony, but we're getting resistance. The colonists don't want to leave. Casey wasn't surprised. How many are refusing? About 40%, ma'am. They're saying this is their home. They're saying they trust us to protect them. Casey felt the weight of those words. 40% of 50,000 people. 20,000 souls who believed Earth wouldn't abandon them. She thought about the easy choice, the civilized choice. Order a full evacuation. Pull back the fleet. Surrender the system. Save lives. But she also thought about what came after. If humanity ran now, what would stop the Vraxians from demanding another system next year? And another the year after that? Where did the surrendering stop? Pull out anyone who wants to leave, Casey ordered. But tell the ones who stay that we're going to fight for them. Tell them humanity keeps its promises. Yes, ma'am. Admiral, the crew of the Defiant voted. Every single person volunteered to stay and fight. I thought you should know. After the transmission ended, Casey pulled up the personnel files for the fleet. Ship by ship she read through them. The UEDS Valiant, under Commander Jack Hayes. The UEDS Sentinel, under Captain Troy Parker. The UEDS Guardian, under Captain Nina Scott. Every ship had a name, and every name represented hundreds of men and women who had volunteered to stand between Earth and those who would threaten it. Her aide, Lieutenant Ryan Foster, approached with a tablet. Admiral, we're receiving encrypted communications from 6 different species. They're asking about our defensive philosophy. They want to know how we're planning to fight. Casey raised an eyebrow. Which species? The Keltharians, Sorvex, Pelmara, and 3 others I've never heard of. Smaller species. They're being very quiet about it, using back channels and encryption. They're tired of surrendering, Casey said quietly. They want to know if there's another way. Is there, ma'am? Another way, I mean? The numbers don't look good. Casey pulled up a tactical simulation she'd been running. Ryan, every species in the galaxy fights the same way. They line up their ships in formation. They trade shots until someone's shields fail. They follow rules of engagement that are thousands of years old. It's like a ritual, not a real fight. And we're going to fight differently? We're going to fight like Earth fights. No rules, no honor-bound formations. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it, when they don't expect it, and we're going to make them pay for every inch of space they take. The Vraxian Third Fleet began its journey toward New Haven. War Primus Thelkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Fang, and watched the stars streak past. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Cross, approached. War Primus, the human fleet has taken up defensive positions around their colony. 47 ships total. Our scouts confirm the Council's intelligence was accurate. Thelkar's scales rippled with satisfaction. 47 against 212. This will be over quickly. Perhaps they will surrender when they see our fleet arrive. Should we offer them another chance to withdraw? Cross asked. No. They made their choice. We will show the galaxy what happens when a species chooses war over wisdom. The other young species will learn from humanity's mistake. We are doing the Council a service. But deep in the Vraxian fleet, some of the younger warriors were less certain. They had reviewed Earth's history, the parts that were available in the galactic database. They had read about something called World War II, about a place called Stalingrad, about battles where humans fought building by building rather than surrender. They had read about kamikaze pilots and last stands and desperate defenses. One young Vraxian warrior, barely past his naming ceremony, asked his commander a question. Sir, what if they don't fight the way we expect? His commander, an old veteran with pale scars across his scales, looked at the young warrior for a long moment. Then, young one, we may finally face a real battle, and we may learn whether the Vraxian Empire is still what it once was, or if we have grown soft from too many easy victories. The fleet continued toward New Haven, and across the galaxy, species watched and waited to see what would happen when humanity's defiance met Vraxian strength. Captain Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the UEDS Defiant and watched the Vraxian fleet drop out of faster-than-light travel. The display showed 212 red dots appearing at the edge of the system, each one representing a warship designed to destroy planets if necessary. Her own fleet numbered 47 green dots, arrayed in a defensive sphere around New Haven. All ships report ready, Captain, her tactical officer said. Lieutenant Chris Martinez had been with her for 3 years, and she'd never heard his voice shake before. It was shaking now, just a little. Send to all ships, Lisa said calmly. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. Make every shot count. The Vraxian fleet began moving toward them in a perfect formation. They came in 3 waves, each wave maintaining precise spacing between ships. It was beautiful in a way, like watching a dance. The Council observers, sitting in their protected ships at the edge of the system, were recording everything. War Primus Thelkar's voice came over the open channel, translated into English. Human vessels, this is your final opportunity to withdraw. Leave this system now, and we will allow you to retreat with honor. Stay, and you will be destroyed. Lisa looked at her crew. Every face was turned toward her, waiting. She thought about all the species that had surrendered in situations like this. She thought about the Caltharian ambassador's words to Kyle Morrison. She thought about her own daughter back on Earth, who had drawn her a picture of the Defiant and wrote, "My mom protects people," underneath it. Vraxian Fleet, this is Captain Lisa Grant of the UEDS Defiant. You are in violation of human sovereign space. Withdraw your forces, or we will be forced to defend our territory. Thelkar's laughter echoed across the channel. At least you are not cowards. The Vraxian fleet opened fire. Beams of energy crossed the space between the fleets, and the battle began. The first thing that surprised the Vraxians was that the human fleet didn't hold formation. The moment the Vraxians fired, the human ships scattered in 47 different directions. Some went up, relative to the orbital plane. Some went down. Some accelerated toward the Vraxian fleet. Some seemed to retreat. "What are they doing?" Cross asked Thelkar. "There's no pattern to their movement." "They're panicking," Thelkar said confidently. "Finish them quickly." But the humans weren't panicking. They were executing a battle plan that Admiral Casey Bryant had spent 3 weeks developing. It was called Operation Hornet, and it was based on a simple idea. If you can't match your enemy's strength, you confuse them instead. The UEDS Valiant, under Commander Jack Hayes, led a group of 6 ships in what appeared to be a suicidal charge directly at the Vraxian flagship. The Vraxian formation shifted to intercept them. Dozens of ships turning to face this threat. That's when the UEDS Sentinel, under Captain Troy Parker, hit them from behind. Troy had taken his ship on a long arc around the system, using New Haven's moon to hide his approach. His railguns punched through the shields of 3 Vraxian destroyers before they even knew he was there. "Split their attention," Lisa ordered her fleet. "Make them look everywhere at once." The Vraxians had never fought like this. Every battle they'd ever won had been a straightforward contest of firepower and shields. Ships lined up, traded shots, and the side with better technology won. But the humans weren't lining up. They were everywhere and nowhere. The UEDS Guardian, under Captain Nita Scott, used the debris from a destroyed Vraxian ship as cover, then popped out to deliver targeted strikes before disappearing again. The UEDS Ranger, under Captain Ben Walker, fired its entire missile payload at one Vraxian cruiser, overwhelming its shields through sheer volume of fire, then retreated at full speed before the Vraxians could respond. Commander Jack Hayes watched his tactical display. His ship had taken heavy damage in the charge toward the Vraxian flagship, but they'd accomplished their goal. Half the Vraxian fleet was now focused on him, which meant they weren't focused on everyone else. "Sir, shields are at 15%, his tactical officer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7. We've lost main weapons." Jack looked at the Vraxian flagship on his screen. It was so close now, barely 10,000 kilometers away. Its main weapon arrays were charging for another shot. That weapon could finish the Valiant in one hit. But Jack also saw something else. The flagship's shield generators were on the outside of the hull, exposed to make them more efficient. It was a design choice that made sense if you never expected anyone to get close enough to target them directly. "All hands, this is the commander," Jack said over the ship-wide intercom. "It's been an honor serving with you. Tactical, set collision course for the flagship. Full power to engines." "Sir," his tactical officer said. "That's an order, Lieutenant. Let's make this count." The Valiant turned and accelerated directly toward the Vraxian flagship. Thelkar saw it coming and laughed. "The human commander has lost his mind. Destroy that ship." But the Valiant was small and fast, and Jack Hayes had been a fighter pilot before he commanded a warship. He knew how to fly. The Vraxian shots came close, but they all missed. At the last moment, just before impact, Jack triggered every weapon the Valiant had left, including the reactor overload. The explosion tore through the Vraxian flagship's shields and disabled its main weapons. The Crimson Fang didn't explode, but it was crippled, drifting, and unable to fight. Jack Hayes and his crew of 230 people died, but they'd taken the Vraxian command ship out of the battle. Lisa watched it happen from the bridge of the Defiant. She felt tears on her face, but didn't wipe them away. All ships, Jack's sacrifice opened a hole in their formation. Hit them now. Hit them hard. The battle raged for 18 hours. The humans used every trick they could think of. They used false transponders to make the Vraxians think there were more ships than there really were. They hacked into Vraxian communications and sent false orders. They targeted specific systems on Vraxian ships, instead of just shooting at whatever was in front of them. Lieutenant Ryan Foster, who was coordinating tactical data from Earth, noticed something interesting. "Admiral Bryant, the Vraxians are slowing down. Their response time is increasing. I think they're getting confused." Casey studied the data. "They're not used to this kind of fight. They're used to enemies who follow the rules. Send to all ships, keep up the pressure. Don't give them time to think." The council observers were silent as they watched. Delegate Zixala recorded everything, her multiple eyes processing data that her species' evolution had never prepared her for. Humans were supposed to lose this battle quickly. Instead, they were making the Vraxians pay for every advantage. The tide turned when Captain Troy Parker managed to destroy the Vraxian formation leader for the second wave. Without central coordination, the Vraxian ships began to make mistakes. They fired at each other by accident. They collided while trying to dodge human attacks. The perfect formation fell apart. War Primus Thelkar, trapped on his crippled flagship, watched his fleet's cohesion collapse. The humans had destroyed or disabled 81 of his ships. 81. His own casualties from the battle were over 6,000 Vraxian warriors. And the humans were still fighting. "Retreat," he finally ordered, the word bitter in his mouth. "All ships, withdraw from the system. We will regroup and return." But as the Vraxian fleet began to pull back, Thelkar knew something had changed. The humans had fewer than half their original ships left. They'd lost thousands of their own people. By any logical measure, the Vraxians had inflicted more damage. But New Haven still flew the human flag, and the Vraxian fleet was running away. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Defiant, which had survived despite taking hits that should have destroyed it. Around her, her crew was exhausted, bleeding, some injured badly enough that they'd been pulled from their stations. But they were alive, and they had won. "Send to all ships," she said quietly. "New Haven remains free. The Vraxians have withdrawn. Well done, everyone. Jack Hayes and all our fallen brothers and sisters did not die in vain." Across the galaxy, species that had never seen the Vraxian Empire retreat from a battle were stunned into silence. The news of humanity's victory at New Haven traveled across the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. Within hours, every species in the Council had seen the battle recordings. Within days, the recordings had spread to species that weren't even part of the Council. The footage showed everything. The human ships scattering like leaves in a storm. The suicide run of the Valiant. The methodical destruction of Vraxian ships by forces that should have been overwhelmed in minutes. Ambassador Kyle Morrison sat in his quarters on Zenith Prime and watched his message queue grow. 63 communications in the first hour after the battle ended. 140 by the end of the day. Some were from species demanding humanity be punished for their barbaric tactics. Others were from species asking questions that hadn't been asked in the galaxy for centuries. The first private meeting came from Ambassador Kren of the Kelfarian Republic. She arrived at Kyle's quarters wearing a formal diplomatic cloak, but her 3 eyes showed something Kyle's cultural database identified as hope mixed with fear. "Ambassador Morrison, my government has authorized me to ask you a question. A very dangerous question." Kren settled onto the perch Kyle had installed for her previous visits. "How did you do it? How did humanity find the courage to fight when everyone told you surrender was the only option?" Kyle thought about his answer carefully. "We didn't think of it as courage, Ambassador. We thought of it as responsibility. The people on New Haven trusted Earth to protect them. We couldn't betray that trust, no matter what the odds were." Kren's feathers ruffled in a pattern that meant she was agitated. "My people have lost 3 star systems in 40 years. Each time, the Council told us to surrender. Each time, we did. We told ourselves we were saving lives, being civilized. But Ambassador Morrison, do you know what happens to a species that surrenders too many times? What happens? They forget who they are. My people used to be warriors. 500 years ago, we defended our territory against anyone who threatened it. But we joined the council, and we learned the civilized way. Surrender, negotiate, compromise. And now, when our young people talk about the lost systems, they don't feel anger. They feel shame. They feel like maybe we deserve to lose them because we weren't strong enough to keep them. Kyle remained quiet, letting Kren speak. If the Vraxians came for our homeworld tomorrow, I don't know if we would fight. I think we would surrender again, and then we would have nothing left. We would be a species without a home, without pride, without purpose. Kren looked at Kyle with all three eyes. You humans showed us something we had forgotten was possible. You showed us that fighting for what matters is still an option. What are you asking, Ambassador? Would humanity teach us? Would you share your tactical knowledge, your strategies, your way of thinking? Not to attack others, but to defend ourselves if we must. Before Kyle could answer, his communication system chimed. It was the Sorvex Collective, the species that existed as a collective intelligence in tanks of blue liquid. Their ambassador wanted a private meeting. Then the Palmara Union requested one. Then 3 smaller species Kyle had barely heard of. By the end of the week, 6 different species had made similar requests. All of them in secret. All of them afraid that the Council would find out they were asking humanity for military advice. Back on Earth, Admiral Casey Bryant found herself in a new role. Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces was her official title. But unofficially, she had become something else. She was a teacher. Lieutenant Ryan Foster stood in front of a conference room full of alien military officers. There were Keltharians, with their silver feathers, Sorvex members in their mobile tanks, Palmara floating in their environmental suits. All of them were here to learn. The key to human tactical doctrine, Ryan explained, using a holographic display to show the Battle of New Haven, is that we don't fight the battle our enemy expects. We fight the battle we can win. A Keltharian officer raised one wing. But Commander Hayes died in his attack on the flagship. How is that winning? Ryan nodded. It's a fair question. Commander Hayes knew his ship was already critically damaged. He could either retreat and likely be destroyed anyway, or he could make his death mean something. By taking out the Vraxian command ship, he disrupted their entire formation. That confusion allowed the rest of our fleet to survive and win. So you sacrifice your people deliberately? A Sorvex officer's translated voice carried notes of horror. No, Ryan said firmly, we never deliberately sacrifice anyone, but we accept that in war, people die. When someone does die, we make sure their death accomplishes something important. We honor their sacrifice by using it to protect others. The alien officers were quiet, processing this. It was so different from how galactic warfare worked, where battles were almost ritualistic, and casualties were considered failures, rather than sometimes necessary costs. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was in crisis. Delegate Zixala had called for an emergency session to discuss humanity's actions. The chamber was filled with angry voices and conflicting opinions. The humans must be sanctioned, demanded the representative from a species called the Torth. They violated every principle of civilized warfare. They used kamikaze tactics. They refused to follow standard engagement protocols. They made war ugly again. But Ambassador Kren stood up, her feathers spread wide. On what grounds should they be sanctioned? Show me the law they broke. Show me the regulation they violated. They defended their territory against an aggressor. That is their right, under Council Charter. They could have surrendered and saved lives, the Torth representative insisted. They saved the lives of 50,000 colonists by fighting, Kren shot back. Would you have them abandon their own people to appear civilized? The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported the Torth position. Others were starting to question whether the old ways of handling conflicts really served everyone's interests. A few species said nothing, but their ambassadors were taking careful notes. The Vraxian delegation sat silently through most of the debate. War Primus Thelkar had been relieved of command after the battle, and a new representative had been sent. War Primus Velsha was younger than Thelkar, and her scales showed colors that Kyle's database said indicated thoughtfulness and reassessment. When Velsha finally spoke, the chamber went quiet. The Vraxian Empire wishes to make a statement. We challenged the humans to battle and we lost. By our own traditions, this means the humans' claim to the New Haven system is legitimate. We will not attack them again. Kyle felt relief wash over him, but Velsha wasn't finished. However, we must also say this. The humans fought differently than any species we have faced in 2,000 years. They fought like we used to fight, before we became civilized. They reminded us of something we had forgotten. That there are things worth fighting for, and that true strength is not just about having the biggest fleet. The Vraxian representative looked directly at Kyle. The Vraxian Empire respects strength. For 3 centuries, we have not truly respected any species in this council, because none of them would stand against us. The humans earned our respect in blood and fire. We will honor that. After the session, Kyle received a communication from Earth. Admiral Bryant's face appeared on his screen. Kyle, we need to talk about what's happening. 6 species are asking us to train their military forces. 3 others have requested defensive alliances. The entire political structure of the galaxy is starting to shift, and we're at the center of it. Is that a bad thing? Kyle asked. Casey considered the question. I don't know. We never wanted to be conquerors or galactic power brokers. We just wanted to protect our people. But now we've shown everyone that the old way doesn't have to be the only way. Species that have been pushed around for centuries are starting to think they don't have to accept it anymore. What do you want to do? Casey said. I want to help them, Casey said. But carefully. We need to make sure we're teaching defense, not aggression. We need to make sure we're not just creating more conflict. Kyle understood. The galaxy is changing, Casey. The question is whether we guide that change or let it happen without us. Across the galaxy, in dozens of systems, young members of species that had forgotten how to fight were watching the recordings of the Battle of New Haven. They watched Commander Jack Hayes' final charge. They watched the human ships refusing to surrender, even when they were outnumbered. They watched 50,000 colonists on New Haven celebrate their freedom. And they began to wonder. If humans could fight for their freedom, why couldn't they? The Vraxian Empire's response to their defeat at New Haven shocked the galaxy almost as much as the battle itself. War Primus Velsha announced that the Empire would assemble a fleet of 500 warships to reclaim their honor and demonstrate that humanity's victory had been a fluke. The announcement sent ripples of fear through the Council. 500 ships would crush Earth's remaining forces easily. Admiral Casey Bryant stood in the command center on Earth, looking at the tactical projections. Her fleet was down to 28 functional warships after the Battle of New Haven. Even with emergency repairs and new construction, she could maybe field 35 ships in 3 months, when the Vraxian fleet would arrive. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Lieutenant Ryan Foster approached her with a tablet. Admiral, we're receiving communications from the Keltharian Republic. They're deploying their fleet to New Haven. 40 ships. Casey looked up sharply. What? They sent this message. Ryan played the recording. Ambassador Kren's face appeared, but she was wearing military armor instead of her diplomatic robes. Admiral Bryant, the Keltharian Republic has voted. We will not stand by and watch humanity face extinction for teaching us to be brave again. Our fleet will stand with yours." Before Casey could fully process this, more messages arrived. The Sorvex Collective was sending 30 ships. The Palmyra Union was sending 25. 3 smaller species that Casey had barely heard of were sending their entire military forces, small as they were. "Admiral," Ryan said quietly, "we're getting reports from across the galaxy. Species are mobilizing. Not all of them, but enough. They're forming what they're calling the Coalition Defense Initiative." Captain Lisa Grant, promoted to Admiral after her leadership at New Haven, appeared on the main screen from her new flagship, the UEDS Defiant II. "Casey, I'm receiving docking requests from Keltharian ships. They want to train with us, learn our tactics, coordinate our strategies. What do I tell them?" Casey felt something she hadn't felt since before the first Vraxian ultimatum: hope. "Tell them welcome to the fight. Tell them humanity doesn't abandon its allies, and apparently our allies don't abandon us either." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session once again. This time, the chamber felt different. Species that had always sat quietly and voted with the majority were speaking up. Species that had surrendered systems without complaint were suddenly asking difficult questions. Delegate Zixala looked older somehow, though Kyle Morrison knew that was impossible for her species. She called the session to order with visible reluctance. The Council faces an unprecedented situation. The formation of a military coalition outside Council authority threatens the stability we have maintained for 2,000 years. A new voice spoke up. It was Ambassador Kren, but she wasn't sitting in the Keltharian section anymore. She stood in the center of the chamber, along with representatives from the Sorvex, Palmyra, and 5 other species. "Delegate Zixala, with respect, the stability you speak of has been purchased with the freedom of smaller species. For 2,000 years, we have surrendered when threatened, because we were told it was civilized. But civilization that cannot defend itself is just slavery with better manners." The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species accused Kren of warmongering. Others defended her right to choose how to defend her people. Kyle watched it all and realized he was seeing something remarkable. The galaxy was having an argument it had avoided for centuries. The Vraxian delegation sat silently until War Primus Velsha stood. Everyone went quiet. "The Vraxian Empire wishes to make an announcement. We are withdrawing our fleet mobilization." Shocked silence filled the chamber. Velsha continued, "We assembled 500 ships to face humanity alone. But now humanity has allies. The coalition numbers over 150 ships from multiple species, all trained in human tactics, all willing to fight. The mathematics are clear. We would win such a battle, but the cost would be devastating to both sides. More importantly, we have been thinking about what the humans showed us. They didn't fight us because they wanted war. They fought because they had something worth defending. Their willingness to die for their principles earned them allies willing to die alongside them. This is true strength. This is what the Vraxian Empire once understood, but forgot." Velsha's scales shifted to show deep blue, which Kyle's database said meant honesty and vulnerability. "The Vraxian Empire proposes a treaty with humanity. We will recognize their claim to New Haven and all systems they currently occupy. In exchange, we ask only that humanity recognize Vraxian sovereignty in our core territories. No surrender, no submission, just mutual respect between equals." Kyle stood up slowly. Ambassador Morrison speaking for Earth. "We accept the Vraxian proposal. We have never wanted to be your enemy. We only wanted to protect our people and our freedom." Delegate Zixala looked between the human and Vraxian delegations. "This is highly irregular. Treaties are typically mediated by the Council over months of negotiation." "Then perhaps the Council's methods need to change," Kyle said gently. "The galaxy is different now. Species are remembering that they have the right to defend themselves. You can either adapt to that reality or become irrelevant." The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Finally, Delegate Zixala proposed something radical, an amendment to the Council Charter recognizing that species have the inherent right to defend their sovereignty by force if necessary. The amendment included new protocols for territorial disputes that didn't rely solely on surrender and negotiation. The vote was close, 7 species in favor, 4 against, and 1 abstention. But it passed. 3 months later, Admiral Lisa Grant stood on the observation deck of the Coalition headquarters, a new station built in neutral space between Earth and the Caltharian homeworld. She was now the supreme commander of the Coalition Defense Initiative, overseeing a combined fleet of 200 ships from 8 different species. Lieutenant Ryan Foster, now promoted to commander and serving as her chief of staff, joined her at the window. "Admiral, the Caltharian Third Fleet just completed their training exercises. They executed the tactics perfectly. Even used some variations we hadn't thought of." Lisa smiled. "They're fast learners. What about the Sorvex? They're struggling a bit with the concept of improvisation. Their collective intelligence wants to plan everything perfectly. But they're getting better." Lisa watched the ships moving in formation outside, human vessels flying alongside Caltharian ones. Sorvex ships, coordinating with Pelmara frigates. It was beautiful in a way she hadn't expected. "Do you think this will last?" Ryan asked. "The Coalition, I mean. Or will everyone go back to the old ways once the immediate threat is gone?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But I know this. Every species in the Coalition has tasted freedom again. They've remembered what it feels like to stand up for themselves. That's hard to forget once you've experienced it." On Zenith Prime, Ambassador Kyle Morrison met privately with Delegate Zixala, one final time before returning to Earth for consultations. The insectoid diplomat poured him a drink that smelled like flowers and tasted like honey. "You changed everything, Ambassador Morrison. I am still not certain whether that change is good or bad." Kyle sipped his drink. Change is rarely all good or all bad. "The question is whether we adapt to it wisely. The humans taught the galaxy to fight again," Zixala said. "Some species will use that knowledge to defend their freedom, as you did. Others may use it to become aggressors themselves. How do you feel about that responsibility?" "Terrified," Kyle said honestly. "But I believe freedom is worth the risk. A galaxy where everyone surrenders to avoid conflict isn't peaceful. It's just a prison where the strong make the rules and the weak obey them." Zixala was quiet for a long moment. "You know, my species was once very different. 3,000 years ago, we were warriors. We fought constantly, and we lost millions to endless wars. When we joined the Council and learned the civilized way, we thought we had evolved beyond our violent past. And now? Now I wonder if we didn't evolve, if we just became afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of loss, afraid of standing for anything that might cost us something." She looked at Kyle with all 4 eyes. "Perhaps the humans didn't teach us to fight. Perhaps you reminded us that some things are worth fighting for." Back on Earth, Admiral Casey Bryant gave a speech to the graduating class of the new Coalition Military Academy. Officers from 12 different species sat in the audience, all of them trained in tactics that had been developed by humans but refined by every species that joined the Coalition. "You are the first generation of a new galaxy," Casey told them. "Your parents and grandparents lived in a time when strength meant accepting defeat to avoid conflict. You live in a time when strength means standing up for what matters, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous." She looked out at the diverse crowd. "But remember this, the goal is never to seek war. The goal is to be strong enough that others think twice before threatening you. The goal is peace through strength, not peace through surrender." The graduates cheered, their voices mixing into a sound that had never been heard in the galaxy before. Humans, Caltharians, Sorvex, Pelmara, and others, all united by a shared belief that freedom was worth defending. In her private quarters that night, Casey read a letter that had been delivered by courier. It was from War Primus Velsha, of the Vraxian Empire. Admiral Bryant, I write to you as one warrior to another. The humans taught my people a valuable lesson. We had become arrogant, believing that our strength made us superior. You showed us that true strength comes not from the size of your fleet, but from the courage of your convictions. The Vraxian Empire will honor the treaty with humanity. More than that, we will learn from you. Not your tactics, but your spirit. The spirit that says some things cannot be surrendered, no matter the cost. With respect, Velsha. Casey smiled and filed the letter away. The galaxy had changed. Species that had forgotten how to defend themselves were remembering. Species that had grown arrogant through easy victories were learning humility. And humanity, the newest and smallest spacefaring civilization, had somehow become the catalyst for it all. She walked to her window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, on New Haven, 50,000 colonists were sleeping peacefully, protected by a fleet that had refused to abandon them. That was what it was all about. Not conquest, not glory, not even victory. Just the simple principle that people deserved to be protected, and that some things were worth fighting for. The galaxy would never be the same, and Casey Bryant thought that was probably a good thing.